Hey guys, just prefacing a preface here. Just wanted to let you guys know that a lot of Anons, when this story was being posted, they didn't actually like the vivid, graphic sex scene details. So he actually cut back on that shit a lot, which is really good for me because it was really uncomfortable to read. And I'm sure you guys really didn't like listening to that shit a whole lot. So it's more focused on the feels aspect and the love aspect once you get past the 5 minute mark on this video. So I do hope you guys enjoy. And there is a second preface after this explaining my absence. Sorry about the long start, guys. Hey guys, it's me, Dova bruh. Believe it or not, I am still alive. If you didn't know what happened, my lung actually collapsed. So I've been in the hospital with that. It just randomly happened. But yeah, I'm back. I'm alive. And I'm going to finish the story for you guys because I feel bad for leaving you hanging for 2 weeks. It's got to be really shitty. Anyways, parts 1 and 2 will be on the screen right here. And if you want to watch this first. And before we go any further, I am going to say I feel a little bit awkward reading this story just due to the nature of I don't know, something's just off to me about describing explicit sexual confrontations with an 11-year-old. Yeah, again, there's going to be a graphic content warning at the beginning of this video, and I sincerely doubt it's going to be monetized. Anyways, here we go, guys. Hopefully this is satisfactory for you. Sorry about the wait. Lily spread her legs aside, those puffy, reddened, parting slightly, and I pressed my cockhead against her, this time fully cognizant of what I was doing, seeing it all beneath me, pressing in oh so gently and yet firmly, her folds pressed inwards, dragging in slightly by my penetrating erection, a strange look that made me worry I was hurting her. I stopped, looked up at her. Are you okay? Maybe it was baited to ask, but I had to. She nodded. It feels like stretching. Well, better than ripping and tearing pain. I withdrew, repositioned, and pressed in again. The same thing happened. Slight inward folding, about half my cockhead successfully making it in, but clearly some sort of tight ring preventing me from going further. I kept going like that. Pull out, press in, try and get a millimeter further each time. It was slow going, and I was on the edge of coming and ruining that moment. From the instant I saw my penis press inside of her, even slightly. Finally, I pressed harder, my hands moving up to her hips to hold her in place as I tried to get past that first little trial. I felt a ring of what seemed like muscle pop down around my cockhead. Have you guys felt that? Oh my god. Oh my god. I paused for a moment and looked at Lily, kissed her more until she actually pushed me away with a soft hand on my chest. You don't have to stop. That took me aback for a moment. I want to kiss you. I looked at her for a moment. Dick buried a solid inch inside of her, trying to decide what my best move was. We love each other. This isn't some stupid... I couldn't find the exact words to say, so I kissed her more. She didn't speak up. I felt my dick beating inside of her, my heartbeat seeming to come from the very tip of my cock now. Finally, I love you too. I do. I want you to. It was her turn to trail off. Last time, Lily and I consummated our relationship in a hotel room. There was a very, very long sex scene that most Anon seemed to disappoint at. Then Lily was back of her country of residence, and I was back to my basement to try and not have an aneurysm each time I remembered the feeling of being inside of her, which is the best feel, let me tell you. It was January. I finished high school in May, and then I had a couple of months to try and make something happen before college began. Full cylinders on Do It Anon were initiated, and I buckled down to do what needed to be done, which, of course, getting the same internship as I had before. Puke. As you all know, my father runs an import company. He rakes in the dough and never paid attention to his son, so it was approximately everything he wanted out of life. I was chill with it too, but having to go to work there again was somewhat an unpleasant thought, as it'd basically be confirming for him that I wanted to take over his company. While my lust/love for Lily was large and overwhelming, it wasn't quite to the point where it outweighed all considerations for my future. Kidding, it totally outweighed that. So when I brought up working between the two offices, with my dad, he flipped his lid, overjoyed that his son was in fact going to make something of himself. He agreed and wrote up a basic description of my responsibilities. Oh no, there were so many. How was I going to sneak into Lily's bedroom with all these things to do? And the timing, just a couple of months of work before I had to get back and get my ass into freshman orientation. It felt rushed, and it was only February. I told Lily what I was planning and she was all for it, but I kept most of those worries to myself. As mentioned at the end of part 2, we kept talking and tried not to focus purely on sex. I did okay at it, but the idea of being able to have sex a second time, maybe even a third or a fourth, was weighing pretty heavily on my mind. We may all pretend like dying a virgin doesn't bother us. When I was 15, I decided that was the deal, but you have no idea what you're missing. I do not know how married people ever get out of bed. Oh wait, because they're old and boring and gross, I guess. The torrent of hormones aside, I talked to Lily more about her own life. Being a half Asian kid in a country full of people of yet another race was not an easy thing. I'm not going to go full Tumblr on you and talk about white privilege and the guilt I felt about our conversation, but when she talked to me about the confusion of speaking Spanish with her friends, English with her father, and censored with her mother, it got to me. First, it reminded me that this girl was a genius and I was a schlub. Second, it made me feel like, I don't know, maybe I could be some sort of stability for her. So I tried to be that stability. Trying to be stability from thousands of miles away, well, it was sort of stupid, but it meant being online at certain times, and after a while I decided to take a risky step forward and propose that we could talk on the phone, as she had friends back in our city and maybe she could get some sort of a budget from her parents. Lily agreed to ask, and within days we were speaking over the phone, beginning a tradition of weekly phone calls. Tradition number 2 for those keeping track. Hearing her voice, well, it was a lot better than just reading it on the screen. She coached me further in my Spanish, which is el shit to this day, as I keep saying, and I reminded her that I love her. She was beautiful. One particular time, from April or thereabouts, made me want to fly down and swoop her away. While racism isn't so prevalent down there as it is up here, there were still some kids who did not like this Asian girl amongst them, and they were calling her bad names in Spanish, then mocking her replies when they weren't fluent. I hope you're as furious reading that as I was when I heard it. Absolute bullshit. Those little shits were nowhere near as smart as Lily. Nowhere near. And no one would love them the way I loved her. And I swallowed that down, but did tell her I would come down and beat them up. She just had to say the word. Her laugh wasn't very genuine, but she seemed to at least appreciate the thought. I can handle them. But I didn't want her to handle them. I wanted to, and it was so stupid. Like I would fly to her middle school and beat up some kids as I prepped to go to college, but that was what I wanted. In analyzing my attraction to her, I started to wonder if perhaps I was just older physically than I am mentally. I felt like she was my peer, my equal, in many ways more mature than I was. It felt like I belonged in middle school alongside of her, and either of us belonged in college. It was her, but that was dumb, and I didn't say it to her. No reason to tear myself down in her eyes. She liked who I was, a fact I had to remind myself of every time those doubts flew into my mind, and they were constant. Days dragged by, and I was finally just a week away from her. I asked her if she was excited to see me. She said of course she was. I did a little dance of glee. I thought about having her in my arms, kissing her again, perhaps finding time for further. Only a few months without Lily felt like an age, and having her back was going to be the best reunion yet. I just knew it. And it was. They did not meet me at the airport this time around. Perhaps Lily's father was able to see the future better than I and didn't want to welcome his eventual replacement into his arms. I very much wanted her arms around me, and mine around her, the moment I touched down in the country, but I figured another day was acceptable. But it was difficult. Work was very busy and her father wasn't treating me like a kid anymore. No constant dinner invites or anything like that. Maybe having 2 girls of that age had him standoffish. Maybe he suspected something. Maybe he just didn't like me anymore. Either way, I started to get desperate. This time, I was staying in a hotel for the entirety of the internship, a nice place that cost approximately $1 a night due to the poor country, and accidentally stumbling over to Lily's wasn't at all realistic. Fuck. What was I going to do? We talked online every now and then. Her summer schedule had her out and about in the evening and doing some volunteer work or out with friends. No school in the morning keeping her in and thus talking to me. Fortunately, my dumb mind didn't have to think alone. I had her working on the other side, trying to come up with ways to see me. She knew I was staying out and on my own, and thus just getting to my place was all she really needed to do. We were much freer here than in the US, as her Spanish abilities were the best in the family, besides her sister, who, as mentioned before, was probably off having sex with Pablo Escobar. Checking up on her was difficult for her parents, but she was an excellent child, didn't really feel the need to be checked up on anyways. Good thing her leering boyfriend knew all this and was willing to take advantage of it. Well, we both took advantage of it. I don't want to be too cruel to her parents. They are great people and they did their very best with their daughters. They couldn't help that one turned into a slut and the other one turned into a Lolita. Is your story actually true, OP? Creative liberties have been taken with identifying details, that's all. But remember, everything on B is not true. Before we get into Lily and I figuring things out, let's take a quick detour down a path that hopefully you identify that left your OP really ashamed of himself. We all know we've done fucking stupid things in the name of love, or in the name of having a really good orgasm. Well, my boss, Lily's father, had family pictures in his office, and God help me if I don't steal one of them at one point. It was a year old. Lily looked even younger, as if that was possible, but it was her. We never sent pictures via the computer, and I was scared of this causing us to be found out. How does AOL work? I still don't know. AOL. I don't know why I said that so weird. So this was one of the few I had of her. Anyways, I don't think I need to tell you what I did with the picture, but oh my god, why did I even write this bit? I'm so ashamed of myself. Let's get back on track and away from that, because my face is red as Moot's ass after he holds an all-mod meeting. Inventing a fake friend was way easier for Lily than I would have thought. Hopefully it wasn't a regular thing, but she informed me that I was now, well, say, Juanita. Like most people, I have always dreamed of being a fiery Latino woman, or girl, so this was fine by me. Our first meetup was going to be a brief evening encounter in town. The idea of other people seeing us, two obvious foreigners, didn't really occur to us until we were in person and it was too late. But at that point, I did not care one iota, as seeing Lily, seeing her in person, running to her and grabbing her and hugging her, that was all that mattered. As we pulled away from the hug, I did a quick once-over. Her breasts were definitely larger, or maybe I had imagined them smaller, or maybe seeing them without a bra had made me more aware of their true size, or even though I am a lecherous creep, I decided staring at Lily's boobs for more than a few seconds was not acceptable, and moved up to her face. I have something to tell you. Lily said this with a happy tilt in her voice, nothing that indicated to me I should be worried. Of course, I got worried anyways. My eyes trailed back to her breasts and then down a bit further, to her stomach, which seemed slightly larger than before. Perhaps my girl was growing up? I'm pregnant. Just kidding. She actually told me that she had missed more than she thought possible. I hugged her again and then peeked around to make sure the local Gestapo did not have their eyes on us, leaning down to plant a kiss on her. Yes, she was definitely taller, as I no longer had to fold myself in half to kiss her. Lily was growing up, and I was happy about it. Fortunately, that little jolt of happiness helped me confirm I was not a pedo, probably, a daily struggle in my mind at that point. We held hands and walked towards a little cafe, sitting together at a table, drinking coffee, looking at one another, drinking each other in, staring at another person who had never seemed at all appealing to me, but now it suddenly was. I tried to memorize every bit of her, from her wide but distinctly Asian eyes to her small pugged nose to her soft, large lips. Fuck, she was gorgeous. I did the cross-leg moves to hide my god-tier erection. Unfortunately, dragging her into some bushes and having my way with her was not an option, so I settled for reaching my foot out towards her leg and running it up and down. Such a stupid romantic comedy move, but after a while, I stopped while we chatted about her day, about how we'd make future meetings happen, about how her family was, etc. When my foot went back to its place by my chair, she reached her own out, slipping off her sandal and placing her bare foot on my calf. I almost lost it in that moment, her dainty, small toes against my, well, scrawny, hairy leg. Phew. It felt very nice. It reminded me of what she felt like moving beneath me. It reminded me of how much I cared about her. It reminded me that I wasn't just obsessed with her, that this wasn't a stupid one-way romance. She liked me too. It was becoming less unthinkable, but no less of a happy surprise. She liked me. Wow. Her foot fell off my leg after a moment, and I almost let out a sad sigh. Others were probably looking, though I am unsure of the cultural attitude towards romances like ours. I saw men who looked older than me with girls who looked her age, so I hoped it was alright. Or, in hindsight, I impute those emotions on myself, because in the moment I was too crazed to care about anyone or anything past the delightful, beautiful girl sitting across from me. It all ended too soon. I think that may have been our first real date. We kissed hello, got a drink, talked, flirted, and then when we got up to go, we kissed goodbye, me heading back to my nearby hotel, her taking a taxi, while I tried to tamp down images of her getting raped and murdered by a taxi driver. She told me that her and Juanita had a wonderful time together, and her parents were very approving of her making a local friend, as opposed to her mostly expat group of friends. I continued to pretend to work while daydreaming about her. The next part is obvious, and you guys said you weren't really into the sex so much, so I'm trying to figure out a way to say it. Within a couple of weeks, Lily was coming to my hotel room. First, we kissed. That first evening, we kissed, cuddled, and watched some television while really watching each other. I didn't want to force the sex on her immediately. I was terrified of her thinking I saw her as my sex doll or seeing herself as such, but my erection pressed into her while we cuddled, and I know she noticed. I hungrily lapped at her mouth, her tongue tasting the mild sweetness, that flavor that was all Lily, that no other girl could ever replicate. My hands on her side still felt so huge, like Mickey Mouse size, as they were practically wrapped around her. Our favorite position was the one we had started with. I'd sit on the chair while she straddled my lap, pressed hard against me while our erection waved the white flag. She'd put her arms on my shoulders, sometimes clasping her hands together or holding my head. I had my hands on her sides, sliding down to her hips to hold her close. Our mouths stayed together as long as we could. Each time we pulled away, we'd just look into one another's eyes, and we'd always smile. Or she always smiled. I may have had a stupid gaze look a few times. An hour of making out with Lily was better than I'd remember. When she left, I wanted to cry, after I jacked off 1,000 times. As I was saying, we did not meet up every night. It wasn't feasible, but she definitely pushed how much her parents were willing to like Juanita. It was the second time that I knew we were going to have sex again. I managed to not masturbate for a full day, though I should have called a doctor as my erection lasted for over 15 hours as I looked forward to that evening. She was coming over again in just a couple of hours. The pregnancy joke above may have been hilarious, but I was actually kind of scared with what I knew, and thus condoms were present this time around. Again, I'm going to give you the softcore version, as the hardcore version seemed to cause some people a disappointment. We kissed at the door, on the bed, and our clothes came off. Her breasts were the same size, to my slight disappointment. One detail that the light-hearted can skip over, she'd shaved herself. I have no idea if this was because she thought I'd like it or what, but it scared me a little. It made me think that maybe she thought I was a complete pedo, but when the girl you love is standing before you completely naked, well, she looks pretty good, no matter what. And I told her as much. I put a condom on this time around. She wanted to be on top, mirroring our kissing position. She held me against herself, pressed her hips downwards, and began that same rocking motion that I'd been in control of last time, though she seemed far less frantic than I to cram my penis inside of her. Maybe this was my big chance to figure out how to make a girl orgasm. I did not take advantage of the opportunity, however. I held her hips in my hand, but continued to let her take her time, working me slightly in further and further. That exact same feeling as before, the ring popping down around me. This time, no further pressure inside as she slid downwards. Okay, oops. I said I was going to be less hardcore. So, let me try and sum up the scene. She maybe managed to rock against me for a solid 15 seconds before I blew. A disappointment to all of you, I know, but hey, I had been working a whole day. She kept going despite this, likely choosing to ignore my cross-eyed, slack-jawed expression. After a while, it wasn't happening. While she was tight enough to hold me inside, I was not hard enough to really provide anything for her to rub against. She pulled herself off and sat on my lap, a hand on my chest, and we lay there for a moment before we began kissing again. This time was much better, far less uncomfortable. No pain for her, presumably, and, well, it was just better. So that was how we decided to have sex from then on. Decided the next time she came over, I picked her up and put her on the bed, making my intentions clear, and she giggled, agreeing to do it as long as she could be on top again. A dom lolly willing to fuck me? Yes, please. That was our schedule from the point forward. She'd come over once a week, sometimes twice, and we'd immediately tear into one another until I came, and then we'd cuddle and sometimes watch a movie or order room service or generally just be two young people in love, one of whom had a company credit card. I got in trouble later. Don't worry. This was the golden age as far as our relationship went. I had no idea how it could get any better than regularly having sex with someone who loved me, and while the sex was incredible, I had nothing to compare it to, so it wasn't exactly holding up her tightness or size up against my dozens of other sexual partners. She was just Lily. And yeah, it was kind of annoying. Anons out there who are having/have had sex, you're out there, don't be shy, will understand this one. I don't have a huge penis. Wow, shocker. But even an average-sized guy is going to have a tough time trying to have sex with a girl of that age and immaturity. She was small, and always taking it slow was sort of a pain. I never got more than 2 or 3 inches inside of her before bottoming out. At the time, this was not an issue, but looking back, I guess it came with the underage territory. Thus ends your logistics of a Liliad lecture. Thanks for reading. Thanks for listening. While we could just go with a montage of me pumping a gallon of sperm inside Lily, I will go to one particular incident. She finally got her parents to allow her to have an overnight with Juanita without them calling Juanita's parents, which had me like, what the fuck? That's crazy. This meant an overnight with me, and I swore I was going to ensure Lily had an orgasm that night. We had time to figure it out. It could not be that complicated. It just couldn't be. She pulled some stubble this time around. Guess the shaving had either been forgotten or earlier had just been a coincidence. I could feel it when I put my hands between her legs, rubbing slightly while we kissed. She pulled away. Surprised, I told her that what we'd been doing up until this hadn't been too fair, though Lily, bless her, said she loved it just as much as I did, and I said I wanted to try something new. Not going to write 500 words on me fingering her, but here's what happened. She laid down while I nestled up next to her, one hand around her head, the other between her legs. From the beginning, I said this was a 2-month work stint, and this was pretty much the end of it. We woke up in the morning and she went back home. The two of us met up one more time in my hotel, had sex one more time, and then on my second to last day, we went on another proper date. This time with my head on a swivel, terrified of my coworkers spotting us, or of anyone spotting us. But Lily in a dress, a dark red piece that showed off her legs, her neck, a matching headband holding that perfect hair back from her face. Well, it was hard to stay nervous or look at anyone else with that vision of beauty in front of me. We had a meal and went to a movie and kissed. We both knew this was going to be it. On the street corner, we wrapped around one another, our bodies entwined in full public view, kissing again and again, finally, with great reluctance, letting one another go. I'll see you next time, I promise. But I was scared. I was going to college. She was turning 14. What would really happen to us in the coming year? Bye, Lily. I love you. Bye, Anon. I'll miss you so much. This time, I managed to hold my tears in check for the most part, but my heart still broke when I got on the plane. I was attending college within the US, but still very far from my home, sort of a fuck you dad on top of desiring to go to an excellent business program. Yeah, I was seeing my future and giving into one that my family had set up for me. First semester freshman year. If you have not started college yet, be aware that it will be the worst period of your life. Tons of new friends, tons of confusing girls, really, just a shit show in every way. I tried to find a way to fit in. All I could think about most days was opening the door of my room and seeing Lily standing there. The feeling of her lips on mine, her arms around me, her body melding against mine, her back arching as she pushed downwards onto me, her face when she looked at me with total love, those soft breasts in my hands, just her everything. Lily. We still talked at night, but not every night. I felt myself drifting as I tried to get into the social scene of college, and she encouraged me to make friends. She didn't want me to have a robot be my only friend, as she referenced herself when we talked online. So I tried to make friends, and I did make some. It was nice. But the guilt started to sneak in. One of my friends had a sister Lily's age. She looked so young and innocent. Her brother adored her and talked of her frequently, saying that some boy had liked her and he'd scared him off. Others talking about getting laid with our peers, slutty sorority girls who were a pretty easy go. I looked at them and didn't see what I wanted. At that point, I only wanted one person, but I was feeling guilty. I had had sex, secretly, with a girl who was barely more than a child. I had been talking to her since she was a child, had kissed her when she was still a child, had perhaps forced my emotions on her. I started to wonder how much of this I had created, how much Lily really cared, and how much she could care at that age. I was just someone she needed to remind her of home, and in order not to lose me, she did what I had wanted. The image of her face when I took her virginity, the fact that she didn't particularly care about pleasure past mine, or so it seemed, the sneaking, the lying, the toll it must have took on her. My guilt deepened and grew, a vast pit I could not escape from. It had been about 3 months since I'd seen her, solidly into the semester, and I was filled with regret. My daily shower masturbation, sorry guys who shared my shower, had slowed and then stopped. The fantasy of Lily bouncing on my lap, suddenly losing its eroticness and taking on a sheen of something bad, something wrong. I had been a bad guy. I loved her, yeah, but who was I to say she even knew how to love? I had corrupted an innocent young girl. I was a fucking monster. That was the final point I reached. I was a monster. I saw the news. I knew what happened to people like me. Sure, maybe our ages were kind of close, but not really. I was 18 and she was 13. She talked about when we'd meet up next, asked how I was in college. For the first time ever, I felt myself closing up, not wanting to tell her everything. I was a shameful monster, and someone as perfect as her should not be talking to someone like that. I faded. Our communication began to slow. She started to seem frantic, just as I predicted. Because I had made her feel those things for me, Lily started communicating with me constantly, scrabbling to find out what was wrong, meeting an emotional wall every time. Before she turned 14, just before the semester ended, I told her it was over. She was devastated, and so was I. Though that's selfish. I cannot imagine how she actually felt, with me taking her everything and then just finishing with her. I told her what I thought, that I was not a good guy for what I'd done with her, and that it was a mistake, that I loved her, but it wasn't right, and it wouldn't be right. She said she loved me, and she didn't care, that it wasn't wrong, but my mind had been made up long before I had the conversation with her. We broke up. My heart was shattered. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I saw the school therapist for what little good that did, as I couldn't bring myself to confess what I'd done. I had crossed so many lines. Lily and I ceased communicating altogether. I felt so alone. Only my college buddies to keep me company. Time passed, and my heart didn't heal, but I learned to ignore it. Learned to ignore the ache when my father spoke of his company, of the branch office. In my mind, Lily and the branch office practically being the same thing. More time passed. Freshman year ended. Sophomore year ended. I fucked a couple of other girls when I was drunk. I was done after the second one, realizing no sex was like the sex I had had with Lily. Everything reminded me of her. Spanish, Asian people, even hotels. I tried to stay away from all of them. I'd fucked up her life permanently, and it was only fair that mine was fucked as well. The end. I broke up with Lily and broke all of your hearts. Yeah, that's where we were last time. I'm sorry for doing that to you. Fortunately, those who stayed in the previous thread way too long knew it was coming. But don't worry, this was not the end. Hooray! Now we move on to the next chapter. A better chapter. Hopefully one that will leave you with many better feels. Or maybe not. Who knows? Things always gotta go down after they go up, including your erections. An administrative note before we start. This picture rumor has to stop. I've never sent a picture, nor do I plan to. Those people are crazy banana liars. I guess that's just OP addressing that any pictures circulating are fake. So there you go, guys. Now you know. Don't believe any pictures you see of Lily. I had started a junior year of college before this story becomes of any interest to you again. Lily and I had not spoken in a year and a half, but I still thought of her. Maybe not every day, maybe not every moment, but certainly more than enough to keep her in my heart. But time was passing, and I was trying to move on. I was in a bad place, and I knew that if anyone ever found out about me having sex with underage... I guess I was supposed to say bait, but he wrote band. A fucking idiot. That would be the end of my life. So I had to keep it quiet and secret. I had to keep the sadness inside. Some of my friends noticed that I wasn't so into girls, and after deciding I wasn't gay enough to be gay, they asked me what was up. I told them I had a very serious girlfriend before college that I was still hung up on. This happened second semester sophomore year, and the fact that that was my reply, well, that said more than enough for me. I was still hung up on her, no matter how hard I tried to forget. I mean, fuck, a year and a half? That should have been a long enough time to forget anyone, but I couldn't forget her. And not just her body beneath mine or her lips on my lips, but everything about Lily. Her voice, so sweet and kind. Her personality, always able to complement my jokes with her own. Her pop culture interests, perhaps slightly molded by me, but able to talk about Solid Snake like a champion. Okay, kind of. Even I don't fully get the Metal Gear Solid story. So, second semester sophomore year, I realized I still liked her and couldn't get over her. First semester junior year was when I began very tentative approaches. Mostly that meant re-adding her AOL name. Strangely, she did not use it anymore. Maybe because she realized we weren't living in 1994 anymore. Just adding that took my emotional strength, and I was kind of glad her username never went green. It had been so long. She had to hate me, and she definitely had to have a boyfriend. There was no way she wouldn't. I was probably a footnote, a forgotten mistake in her past, but I had to try. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. A sad hat tip to the many Anons reading who have said they wish they could undo that mistake. I had to give it another shot and see. She was 15 now, turning 16 in a few months. That was pretty old. Definitely far closer to acceptable, and one of my college friends was dating a senior in high school, so dating a sophomore? No, still pretty fucked up, but closer. This was all for nothing though. Despite me staying up late at night to think about it, I knew she'd just reject me, be the same horrible person to me that I had been to her, and it would be completely fair. I wouldn't have to wonder. That was what was most important. All the girls around me were nothing like Lily. I couldn't see anything in them what she had. Not the spark, not the... I went down the same path so many times in my head. I loved her. I did. I started to look at why I had broken up with her. The guilt, the shame, the worry that I had ruined her. Getting back in touch with her would at least confirm that last part. Had I ruined her? Hopefully not. Thinking about her becoming a slut who... No. That was one path even my imagination wouldn't go down. She wouldn't. She couldn't. Right? Oh god, the image was in my head now though. Maybe I turned into someone who needed men to give her value, or some sort of crazed nymphomaniac. Okay, sex with me wasn't that good. It was my first few times, but I wondered all the same. Sex with me now is awesome, as all you Anons know. Terrifying. All the possibilities were terrifying. Ironically, it didn't even matter, as I had no way of contacting her. I just had an AOL name and a phone number. Calling the phone was out of the question. The international charge and trying to explain why I was calling would be very difficult. But a month passed without her signing into AOL. I decided only a month later than I should have that she didn't use it anymore, so I had to go with the phone number. I had to talk to her. While my constant worry and doubt was beginning to fade away, I was left with the overwhelming desire to talk to her just one more time. Coming up with an excuse wasn't the most difficult thing I've ever done. I was being groomed to take her dad's job, and calling him to check would be just the condescending thing he'd expect from me. A personal check-in, ensuring all in his life was fine, maybe asking some good things about living in the country where they lived in. Perfect. He could deal with the international charges. I barely understood how those things worked anyway. It was decided. I waited until an evening when my roommate was away fucking his girlfriend or boyfriend. That guy was faggy as hell. A few hours past my bedtime in order to call them at a decent hour. I dialed. When the phone started ringing, I almost shot myself. For the 50th time this story, I think. I was so close. And what was the plan to even talk to Lily? Fuck. I hadn't thought this through very well. Sorry for all the swearing. This part of the story makes me nervous. I can practically feel my palms sweating like they did that day. They were like fountains that I'm fairly certain her dad could hear over the phone. Yes, he picked up, and we talked for a little while. I went for the cultural approach, asking him how he dealt with living down there long term, etc. It was an okay conversation. He likes me enough and was hoping to keep me away from his job long enough to retire, which was fine since I am not Gordon Gekko. I asked how his family was at an appropriate time. He talked about his oldest, attending university in that country, apparently with an extremely serious boyfriend he liked, but he could barely speak English, which made him nervous. Then I pushed slightly further and gave me a tidbit about Lily. She was in school and happy. Yep, that's all I got. I couldn't think of a not strange way to get him to say more, so I dropped it and the conversation ended shortly thereafter. It was scary. When I asked about her by name, he seemed to close off slightly, which I read into for the next week. Did he know something? Had she said something? Were there suspicions? How could they have lasted over 20 months, or was I just being insane? I tried to settle on that last option, but it kept gravitating towards another, that she had said something about me, that I was a bad guy, creepy, rapey even. What might she said in order to get back at me? What would make her dad not like me? I obsessed. That's what I'm best at. After the period of obsession was over, I realized I was back at square one. I called them and heard basically nothing about Lily, and still had no contact with her. I had to talk to her. That was my banner in my head at all times, what every post on B seemed to be telling me. Maybe I was the faggy roommate. I did browse B in front of him. But how? Flying to her country and saying hey was most likely the worst idea, but so was calling her house every day in hopes of her picking up the phone. The one conversation with her dad had ended pretty, let's say, firmly, and that I couldn't even come up with an easy reason to call back immediately, if at all. I settled on pathetic brooding. There was no way to talk to her. I'd cut off my ties, and trying to reinstate them was too hard. There was no method I could make work. It was over. It really was. I guess saying the obsessive period was over was a lie. I just entered a new period of obsession. An easy way to get in touch with her was not presenting itself, so I settled on the hard way. This, of course, meant stalking her online. Moot, help me. This is a part of the story that no one except me knows, and now you guys, so let's keep it quiet. I googled her and found her profiles using the same AOL username she'd once had, and browsed them, trying not to look at / get turned on by her pictures for too long. And yes, these profiles still exist if you feel like becoming a pro-level stalker. They weren't too locked down, but were primarily in Spanish, so I fired up Google Translate to get some pretty meaningless tidbits from her life, but it felt like I was close to her. Confirmed as basement loser faggot. Sorry, guys. I tried going back in time to when we broke up, but her profiles were basically blank back then. Sadly, I guess, I wanted to see if she was sad, which was selfish and dumb. There were never pictures, until there were. She was almost 16 now, and oh my god, B. Oh my god.